Hello and welcome to my March Mystery Madness video. The plan that I had was to finally begin reading my Sherlock Holmes collection. I have a volume 1 and 2 set. However, Sherlock is going to have to wait a little bit longer. He's been ever so patiently waiting on my shelves for probably about 15 years. What I did end up reading for the March Mystery Madness is one book that I did plan to read, which was The Bone Code by Kathy Reichs. And I had planned to read Postmortem by Patricia Cornwell. And as it turns out, I ended up reading the other book included in this volume, which was Body of Evidence. So her first 2 books. That's why I didn't get to Sherlock Holmes. Originally, I just planned to read Postmortem. So the 2 authors that I decided to read, I had picked up Kathy Reichs' The Bone Code at the library a few visits ago, but I had gotten into other books, so I returned that to the library without reading it. As luck would have it, I found a copy of the book for all of $4.50 at my local thrift store, so I decided to pick it up and then I could read it whenever I found the time. Prior to finding The Bone Code, I had found Patricia Cornwell's Volume 1. This is the Scarpetta Collection, Postmortem, and Body of Evidence. And I heard about this author from Beyond Books. Renee was talking about having read this author and a number of her volumes, so I decided to check it out. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read either of these authors. I typically don't read true crime books for a variety of reasons. Some of it has to do with my past work experience. So it was a bit interesting to read these 2 books, particularly because there is a 31-year gap in between them. Patricia Cornwell started writing her novels in 1990, which was Postmortem. Body of Evidence was published in 1991. The Bone Code by Kathy Reichs was published in 2021. A lot has changed in terms of forensic science, how things are done, and policies in that time period. So that made it a very interesting read and comparison between these 2 books, how things were done and the type of evidence that they would collect and be able to use, as well as the turnaround time for that evidence. So let's start with Patricia Cornwell. As I say, I ended up reading both of the novels contained in this volume. In the back, it tells us a bit about the author. The award-winning former crime reporter for the Charlotte Observer, Patricia Cornwell spent 6 years working for the Virginia Chief Medical Examiner's Office and as a volunteer police officer before she wrote her first Dr. K. Scarpetta novel, Postmortem, which received outstanding international acclaim and made her the only author ever to win 5 major mystery awards in a single year on both sides of the Atlantic for a first novel. It goes on to talk about some of her other novels that she has written. So she was pulling on some of her own past work experience, obviously, to put these works together. Postmortem. On the back there is a quick summary of both of the novels. So Postmortem. Under cover of night in Richmond, Virginia, a human monster strikes, leaving a gruesome trail of stranglings that has paralyzed the city. K. Scarpetta suspects the worst, a deliberate campaign by a brilliant serial killer whose signature offers precious few clues. With an unerring eye, she calls on the latest advances in forensic research to unmask the madman. But this investigation will test Kay like no other because it brings sabotage from within and someone wants her dead. It's a very interesting story. It's not for the faint of heart because there are certainly some details and descriptions in the book that some people may find quite disturbing. In this, as it's the first novel, we learn not only about Kay herself, but some of her family and various issues that come up with that. It was interesting reading this book. One, because it brought back a lot of different memories. It's talking about computers and C prompts because, of course, in 1990, this was long before things like home computers, the internet, social media, cell phones. None of that existed. It was a very different world. Investigations were handled much differently. So it was a trip to the past. And partly for me, a trip to some of my past work experience. So it was a different read for me, not so much because of the content in the story, but all the different memories that came up with it. I decided to read book 2 because after finishing Postmortem, I knew this isn't a book that I would be reading again, and I will be putting this into my unhaul pile. Body of Evidence is the next book in here. Reclusive author Beryl Madison finds no safe haven from months of menacing phone calls or the tormented feeling that her every move is being watched. When the writer is found slain in her own home, Kay Scarpetta pieces together the intricate forensic evidence while unwittingly edging closer to a killer waiting in the shadows. Again, the details of the crimes are quite graphic, and that's part of why I won't be reading these stories again. I get for some people that may be an attraction to this type of book, what makes it interesting. I personally, I don't watch true crime typically on TV. I don't read about it, and I don't watch the news. She just isn't an author that I found enjoyable. I just wanted to get to the end and be done with the story. As far as the characters themselves, Dr. Scarpetta is rather interesting in terms of the amount that she drinks. You can definitely tell from reading this that it was written, even though it's only 31 years ago, it was a very different world. You have people who are drinking quite often throughout this. You have people who are smoking tobacco indoors. So little things like that. As I say, commenting about C prompts on computers, most people wouldn't even know what that means anymore, let alone what a modem would be, and a computer being hacked in that time period is very different than computers being hacked in 2024. So from that point, it was somewhat interesting. What I didn't enjoy about her particular writing style is that in both Postmortem and Body of Evidence, for quite a chunk of the story, she's leading you into this one person who is potentially guilty and then suddenly flips it all around near the end of the book. Personally, I found that immensely irritating. For me, part of that could be my past work experience. I don't appreciate having my time wasted being taken down this massive detour when all along had you followed the other pieces properly, you would have gotten to the solution much quicker. So I found that frustrating. As I say, that occurred in her second novel as well. So for me, the writing style isn't something that I enjoyed, partly because of how graphic the details are of the crime scenes, because of you're taken for chapters and chapters down the wrong road. And I really found the officer Marino irritating and quite offensive. I won't get into all the specifics, and certainly regardless of what type of job you're talking about, you have your schmucks and you have your very good, dedicated people. But Marino is really, to me, not a very likable character. He's loyal to Kay, which is great, and he looks out for her, but the way that he talks, the issues that he has with certain groups, it just, nope. I don't know if he changes throughout some of her other novels, but in these first two, he just is not likable at all. So for me, Patricia Cornwell isn't someone that I'm likely to read again. Now, the other author that I read was Kathy Reichs and The Bone Code. Part of why I decided to give her book a try is because I did watch her series Bones, which is, yes, unusual for me. Part of the reason that I ended up watching that series is because it focused on anatomy. And there's the crime aspect to it, but most of it, from what I paid attention to, was about all the different anatomy and how all that information came together. Now, the series started in the 2000s, so of course there were many changes by that point in terms of forensic science, different databases that had been put together and were available, things like fingerprints, DNA analysis had come so much farther. Computers certainly were a thing by that point and played into that. Part of the interest in that series for me was the fact that I was also at that time working on my reflexology certification, and I needed to know about anatomy. Now, my background is psychology, so anatomy was completely new, and I had to learn all of that in order to pass my 3-hour reflexology exam. So watching Bones actually helped me. And when she was talking about metatarsals and other things, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's from this chapter. So in a way, for me, it was a different way to study and learn about the anatomy. The Bone series ran for 12 seasons, which is quite a long time on TV, and definitely different from streaming series now. Season 8 and 9 is how far back I went, had 24 episodes each. Seasons 10 and 11 both had 22 episodes. The shortest season was season 12 when they were ending, and that typically seems to happen when shows are ending. They end halfway through the year. So season 12 only had 12 episodes, which is still more than these so-called seasons on streaming. On the back, we learn a bit about the author. Kathy Reichs' first novel, Deja Dead, published in 1997, won the Author Ellis Award for Best First Novel and was an international bestseller. So she began writing 7 years after Patricia Cornwell. The Bone Code is Kathy's 20th entry in her series featuring forensic anthropologist Temperance Brennan. Kathy was also a producer of Fox Television's longest-running scripted drama, Bones, which is based on her work and her novels. One of very few forensic anthropologists certified by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology, Kathy divides her time between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Montreal, Quebec. So she works between both countries, which would be quite challenging because, as I did learn both from her work and Patricia Cornwell's, the Canadian system and the legal system in the United States are very different. That means that Kathy Reichs has to be well versed in how the legal systems work in both countries, because, as I say, there are certainly differences between them. As for how the character of Temperance varied between the TV program, and she was portrayed by Emily Deschanel, who did a great job, and the character in the novels. In the TV program, Temperance works for the Smithsonian Institute, and she works closely with Booth, who is an FBI agent. In the TV program, she hasn't been married, and her lifestyle is very different than Temperance in the novel. In the novel, Temperance has been married previously. She's now divorced. She has an older daughter who is, in this novel, deployed in Afghanistan at the moment. Temperance also has a cat that she takes traveling with her between Canada and the United States. So a bit of difference between the two characters. Also, in the novel, Temperance works for the Mecklenburg County Medical Examiner's Office, so a different location than in the TV program. As I mentioned, this book was published in 2021, so as we were still partly into issues with COVID and the virus, this particular novel involved genetics, tracking information down, a past case that Temperance was unable to solve. The other handy thing that I enjoyed about her book is that she includes a map of the areas that are involved. So as she's describing different details of where things are found and where certain events occurred, you can always flip back to the map if you're not familiar with the area and kind of piece together where things were happening. That was just an extra little bonus that I personally enjoyed. Another difference that I forgot to mention with Temperance is that in the novel she has a roommate slash partner named Andrew Ryan, who is a retired Quebec police officer, and they work quite closely together on the different cases. Unlike Patricia Cornwell, although Kathy Reichs does describe the findings and there's a murder involved, the details are somewhat different, not quite as graphic, partly because in this case the bodies are found in a container and wrapped up. In the two stories by Patricia Cornwell, items used were ropes and axes. So of course that's going to be a very different scene and condition of the bodies. What I did prefer about Kathy Reichs' novel is it keeps you moving. I didn't feel like I wanted to just hop to the end and find out what was going on. There's different things, not just about the murder. It gives us some insight into things she's doing when she's not at work in terms of a very high maintenance friend. I did get a chuckle because reading about her friend, there's the comment that her friend is watching Bones on TV. which was humorous because, as I say, the series is based on Temperance Brennan. Good for a chuckle. So there are some lighthearted moments. I enjoyed that her cat Birdie doesn't just get left at home. He apparently is quite well traveled. Each chapter ends with a bit of a cliffhanger, so you want to keep going to find out where things are headed and how things are all going to connect together. Because this was written in 2021, things like Facebook and Zoom are mentioned for making connections, whereas in Patricia Cornwell's book, of course, everything was done either in person or by telephone because Zoom did not exist at that time. So it was very interesting to read both of these novels. I may end up reading another Kathy Reichs novel. As you can see, there are a number of pages that I have tabbed, which means I need to go through this book again. And there were either things that I noted that stood out because of the time frame that it was written in. There may be an interesting quote that I enjoyed, or there was just something that made me chuckle or gave me a clue about who the culprit was and where the story was going to go. Those were my 2 reads for March Mystery Madness. If you're interested in the mystery genre or hearing about what other booktubers are saying and who else is participating, be sure to go to #MarchMysteryMadness, where you'll find a number of great content creators talking about the various books that they read for this event. I may participate again next year. I'll have to take a look through my books and decide. Sherlock has been waiting for a long time, so I may start reading some of his stories soon. I've certainly seen a number of movies about Sherlock Holmes, and I've enjoyed the different takes on the stories. I think part of reading that for me is one, they're set in a different time period and, they're completely fiction. I've also come across, of course, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as I've been looking into spiritualism and different things about the paranormal. So not only is he a well-known mystery writer, but he also comes up in other subjects as well. If you've enjoyed this video or found it to be of interest, be sure to hit that like button. Leave me a comment down below. Are you Team Reichs? Are you Team Cornwell? Or do you enjoy both of those authors? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about them. Also, if you're interested in content of a bookish nature, if you enjoy nature videos or silly cats, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. Until next time, take good care.